Welcome into Teal the Show. A little bit of a new look, but the same content you know and love right here as we get you ready for the Jaguars' first game of the year. We've got 1010XL's Frank Frangie here. Frank, regular season is finally here. We're almost to that first game. We're finally just counting down the days.
Yeah, I can't wait for football. And I tell you, of all the excitement we've had in all the years, Jamal, we've had excitement about the Jaguar season starting. Man, it hadn't felt like this in a long time. Maybe not ever. Maybe you might have to go back 20-some years before a season felt like this. And I'm including the 2018 season. People were excited when that thing started, but it wasn't like this. So I think we're all ready to get started. Can't wait.
All right, we've got a fun show planned here. This is going to be a little bit of our prediction show. So this is the show you want to bookmark, save, so that way you can come back a little bit later on, tell us how wrong we were with all of our expectations. So I think, Frank, the best way to start here, you mentioned the expectations for the Jaguars. The first question is, we got to put a prediction down for wins and losses for the team this year. It's a tough one because expectations are high, very talented bunch, but they do also have a tough schedule.
Yeah, I've said all along, I think they're going to be an 11-win team. I think 11-6. I don't have them at 13-4 yet. I think they may be headed to that. But 11's a lot of wins. I think that's going to win the division. I think they're by far the better team in the division. Tennessee always battles and scraps. But I think they're an 11-6 team, Jamal. I've said that from day one. And I think 11's good, by the way. People say, why don't you have it 13 or 14 wins? That's hard in the NFL. I think they're going to win the division. I think they're a growing young football team. I've got them at 11-6 this year.
All right, you may have been checking my notes on that one because I got the same number written down right in front of me, 11 wins. That's a little bit up from where I was maybe earlier in the offseason when the schedule first came out and people were kind of coming for my head. But 11 wins I think is good. That's enough to get you in the postseason. You feel good about how things rolled. And then, you know, ultimately the goal is win your division, get into the postseason, and then anything can happen. You got a shot at that point. All right, Frank, the next stop that we have to go is when you look at the schedule. There are a lot of tough games. I mean, week 2 against the Chiefs is definitely no cakewalk, but what's the toughest game on the schedule when you look at it? I'm pretty sure we're not going to see this one as the same play.
Yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 things you discussed. You know how the NFL goes, Jamal. The way the NFL plays out is you beat the Chiefs and then lose to the Falcons. It makes no sense, but that's the way the whole thing plays out. So for me, obviously the Chiefs are the best team they're going to play. I don't think there's any question about that. I think that's the best team they're going to play. But I'll tell you the hardest game for them to win, you won't pick this one. It's at New Orleans for me. It's a short week. It's a Thursday night game. They will have not had a bye. They'll be waiting for a bye. They'll have already been to London. I think that will be the hardest game for them to win. Not the toughest team that will play, but the hardest game to win is at New Orleans, who I think has a pretty good team, on a short week, after a trip to London, after a lot of us all worked in there together. If you told me one game that I think they're not going to win, I'd pick that one.
All right, we're actually in a little bit of the same vein here, Frank. I'm just a week ahead of you. I think that second game against the Colts is the really tough one because back-to-back weeks in London, come back and immediately have a game against a division opponent, given it is at home. But you've made that trip back and forth to London, spending that time change there for 2 weeks and then come back and immediately having to prep for the second time around against a AFC South opponent like the Colts, a team that has given them trouble in the past, even if the Colts seem to not be able to win here in Jacksonville. That's a game I've consistently just keep circling. I'm like, that one just seems really tough and difficult. So I think we're still on the same track, just different games right in that same range.
Absolutely. And listen, I get your point. I just don't think the Colts are going to be very good this year. I think the reason they're playing Anthony Richardson is because they know this isn't their year. So get as many reps as you can for your young quarterback because he is the future. They may have Jonathan Taylor by then, but I'm not sure they're going to have him at all. I don't think the Colts are going to be a very good football team. We'll see.
All right, one of the things that is the difference between the Jaguars and the Colts is their young quarterback for the Jaguars is starting to enter that upper echelon of the quarterbacks in the NFL. We know what he can do. Last year, the Jaguars' offense ranked 10th in points per game for offense, and they've made some additions, second year in Doug Peterson's offense as well. The question is, can those additions really help to push them? Can the Jaguars be a top 5 scoring offense this year? They weren't far from it last year. Do you think that the addition of Calvin Ridley, the second year in Doug Peterson's offense, having Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, the whole band back together is enough to put the Jaguars in that top 5 scoring offense range?
No doubt in my mind about that one, Jamal. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if they led the league in scoring. Now, I probably wouldn't predict that because the Chiefs are still around and there's still some explosive teams. but there's no doubt in my mind they'll be in the top 5 in scoring. I think it's one of the best offenses we've ever had in Jacksonville. If the line holds up, there's no weak areas. There's depth. There's a chemistry between the quarterback and the receivers, including the newest one, Calvin Ridley. Yes, I think they'll be a top 5 scoring offense. Jamal, I think maybe higher than that. I think they'll be one of the best scoring offenses in all the league. I really do.
This should be the highest scoring offense in Jaguars history, without a doubt. I mean, the talent is there. I'm with you. I think they can be a top 5 offense. Again, they weren't far from it last year, just a couple of points difference. And then I know we've talked about all of the real weapons, Calvin Ridley's, the Travis Etienne's, the Tank Bigsby's. Don't forget, Brandon McManus has a leg on him, and those 3 points can make a difference. Last year, the Jaguars, though, if they added those 3 points a game, that would have pushed them up those rankings. So I think Brandon McManus is an undervalued weapon by a lot of people. So, yes, I do expect the Jaguars to have a phenomenal offense this year, one that Jaguars fans are going to be doing a lot of celebrating about touchdowns, hopefully more than field goals. But I do think McManus weighs in on that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. He's a very good kicker. Look, there's no weak area. If the line holds up, where's your weakness? There's none. And you're right. Brandon McManus might be the final piece of that. But if the line holds up, Jamal, there's not a weak area in that offense. Zero.
All right, let's flip the script a little bit, because when we talk about this team, we always talk about the strength of the offense and then maybe some question marks on the defense. Last year, when the Jaguars' defense was at its best, it was because they were forcing turnovers left and right. They were one of the top units in the league. But, you know, turnovers can be a little bit of a fickle stat. Do you think the Jaguars' defense can be top 5 in the league in turnovers this season?
I think they can be. I'm not nearly as convinced they will be. I think turnovers have a lot of things. Number one, you have to try and script the ball. I think you have to try and break on the ball. I think there's some things that go into play. And sometimes you're fortunate. I think teams that create a lot of defense or turnovers do it for a reason, because they're good at it. I think the Jags will be good at it. But can they be a top 5 takeaway team? Sure. Would you ask me to bet on that? I probably wouldn't bet on that. In today's day and age, Jamal, where offense is all the rage, I don't think I'd bet on that for any one team. Can the Jags be that? Yes. Do I necessarily anticipate it? No, I don't.
Save your money, Frank. Look, turnover regression from year to year is real in the NFL. I think the Jaguars do have some players. Like, I expect Andre Sisco to beat his interception number from a year ago. I think he's going to be a much better player. But look, we saw some great plays and some great plays off of turnovers for the Jaguars last year. Replicating that year in and year out is difficult. We've seen some defensive teams be able to take on that personality and kind of do that year in and year out, but I don't know if the Jaguars are there yet. Still some young players kind of finding their way. Overall, I do think the defense will be a little bit better in some areas than they were a year ago, but I just don't see the turnovers being there again, because that's such a fickle stat. One year it's great. The next year the ball bounces the other way. Those fumbles that you got, all of a sudden they're recovered by the offense. It's just such a tough thing to kind of put your thumb on.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's hard to repeat that way, but I think there'll be a better defense, to your point.
All right. Now, the one spot that fans keep asking for is pass rusher, Frank. Everybody's kind of concerned, at least a little bit, about the Jaguars' pass rush situation. So when we look at it, right now, as we sit here, who do you think is going to end the season as the Jaguars' leader in sacks?
I think it has to be Josh Allen. I know that's the easy answer, but I think it has to be. Number one, Trayvon Walker is going to be a very good player. I've told you this. I've said this consistently, Jamal. I don't know that he's ever going to be a sack specialist. I just don't know if that's what he is. He's a big physical player. He plays the run. He'll have some sacks. He'll pressure the pocket. He's a good football player. I don't know that he's ever going to be a sack specialist. Josh Allen needs to be. He's in a contract year. He left and spent time training in Arizona to get his body in the best shape of his life. He's committed. He's as committed as he's ever been. He knows he has to prove it. Josh is a smart guy. He knows that it hasn't happened for him after that first year. And when it hasn't happened for him, it hasn't happened as much for the defense. It has to be Josh Allen. I don't know what kind of year Josh is going to have, but for them to be everything we expect that they can be, he's got to be. The other thing is, there's not a lot of pass rushers on the team that's what they do. They hope Caleb Chase on the light comes on. They hope Yasir Abdullah is the rookie they want him to be. DeJuan Smoot's going to be back at some point. But there's just not a lot of exterior pass rushers on the football team. There's really not. They'll get some push in the middle. That'll help. But there's just not a lot of guys that fit that mold on this football team.
There's definitely a lot of pressure on Josh Allen. They need him to have a big year, but I'm going to go with the other guy. I think Trayvon Walker is going to have to be more Batman while Josh Allen needs to be the Robin. I think Trayvon Walker is going to have a big second year, Frank. I know we've kind of talked about this back and forth. He looks like he's more comfortable out there. He can play at full speed now. He says he's just seeing things differently. I think this is a big year for Trayvon. I think he can get to that double-digit sack mark. We've been saying Josh Allen should get back to that mark for a long time now, it feels like, and he just hasn't got there. So I'm going to go to the other side. I think the Jaguars need Trayvon Walker to find a way to show everyone that he can be that guy. And you know what? Look, we talk about the second year in the NFL, that second year jump. Trayvon Walker can make a similar second year jump. Different pass rushers that have gone #1 overall. Guys like Mario Williams did it. Khalil Mack wasn't a #1 overall pick, but he's another guy that in his second year took a big jump. Cameron Jordan did the same thing. Jadeveon Clowney, Myles Garrett, all those guys, maybe different players from what Trayvon is, but they all took second year steps. And the hope is that Trayvon can take that big second year leap. I think he's going to lead the Jaguars in sacks. I know we're kind of crossing antennas a little bit here, but overall, somebody's got to get to the quarterback, right? Look.
Yeah, well, he's more Mario Williams than he is Khalil Mack.
Yeah.
He's a big physical guy, and hopefully that physicality will matter. We'll see.
All right, we'll still got plenty more Teal the Show coming your way. Coming up after this, we're going to kind of turn the page and look at the NFL as a whole and talk about what we expect for the season. That's straight ahead when Teal the Show returns. Welcome back into Teal the Show. All right, Frank, we've kind of looked at just the Jaguars section of the NFL, just our little corner here in Jacksonville. But we're going to broaden things out, look at all 32. But first, let's start about some of the young quarterbacks. The Jaguars have 2 rookie quarterbacks starting in the division, plus one of them is a former Florida Gator. Out of the rookie quarterbacks in the NFL, who do you think is actually going to have the best season this year?
Bryce Young's the best player. He's a small guy. You got to hope he doesn't get injured, and he's going to be playing right out of the gate. I think he'll have the best year. I'm very intrigued with what Anthony Richardson does because we're going to see him twice. We're going to see him twice in the first 6 weeks, the point we made earlier in the program. And he's got the biggest upside in terms of strength, arm strength, speed, physicality. But I think Bryce Young is the guy that's the most ready. I'm not even convinced Bryce Young will be the best guy 7 years in, Jamal. But as far as right out of the gate, he's going to be given every opportunity. Frank Reich's a really good developer of quarterbacks. Give me Bryce Young as the best rookie quarterback. He should be. He's the first pick, right? But I think he'll be the best guy.
That means something. I think you're right. Bryce Young should be the best guy, but I got to tell you, the upside on Anthony Richardson just scares me. I mean, in that offense in Indianapolis, if some kind of way, and I know he didn't do this in Gainesville, was run the ball consistently, that big, that fast, that athletic. If they can figure out how to get that guy to run the ball consistently at that quarterback position, I mean, I don't know how defenses are going to be able to handle that. You got a quarterback that size running the read option. It concerns me. That upside is definitely there. Okay, we talked about some young quarterbacks, but let's talk about maybe that next step over, because, you know, it's a wave of young quarterbacks who are really taking the NFL by storm now. NFL MVP, Frank. Who do you think is going to take home the trophy this year, and does our guy here in Jacksonville have a shot?
Yeah, here's what I tell you. I think Patrick Mahomes is the MVP, and I think he's the best player in the league. I think he's the best quarterback. I think he's the best player. He's one of the best players that has come along in a long, long time. I think he's Tom Brady with different skill sets. I think he's that good. So it would be disingenuous for me, just for the sake of a television show, to pick somebody else. I think he's going to be the most valuable player. But I'll tell you this. I think Trevor Lawrence is in play. I think Trevor is going to have one of those seasons that when the voters have to vote for MVP, he's on the ballot. Some guys are going to vote for him just to mix it up and be somebody different. But I think he's going to have a bigger year than Joe Burrow. I think he's going to have a bigger year than Josh Allen. I think he's going to be right there. I mean, statistically, I think he's going to be at the very least, right there with those guys. But Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the league, and I don't think there's any doubting that, Jamal. He'll be the MVP, I believe.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence got some votes last year, got more votes than anybody in Jaguars franchise history has ever last season, so we'll see if he can get a few more this year. I think Jalen Hurts is the guy. I think he's going to stuff the stat sheet this year. I mean, the way they use him in the red zone is definitely going to fluff up those rushing touchdown numbers, and he's got some guys on that offense that are going to help him out a lot. I do agree with you, though. Patrick Mahomes is definitely in a league of his own, but I think Jalen Hurts is going to take another step forward and definitely going to have a stat-filling kind of season. So maybe the Eagles are a team that we're watching, and maybe one that we're going to talk about here in just a second. Let's talk Super Bowl matchups, Frank. The AFC we know is stacked. NFC not as stacked. Maybe two teams that are kind of separating themselves from the pack here. Super Bowl matchup. Let's put it on dirt. We're writing it in concrete right now. Well, who you got?
Same game. I hate to do that. I hate to be that guy. I hate to be the chalk guy. Frangie took chalk again. But I do think the Eagles are a good bit better than the 49ers. I don't know if their roster's better, Jamal, but if you factor in Jalen Hurts, I think they're a good bit better than a team playing a very young new quarterback and Brock Purdy, who's coming off a big injury. And I don't think anybody else in the NFC even competes with those two. I don't even know who the third best team is. Is it the Cowboys? I know they've won 12 games 2 years in a row, but I don't know if the Cowboys are all that great. So for me, there's a drop off between the Eagles and the 49ers than everybody else. And I think the Eagles are the better of the two teams. Look, the AFC is fantastic. I think the Bills are going to be better than people think, that they're not going anywhere. The Bengals with Joe Burrow, the Jaguars. I think those are the top three. In my mind, those are the teams. The Bills, the Bengals, and the Jaguars will all battle for that opportunity to take down the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are so good. You get quarterback and coach right, you win a lot of games. And they've got Andy Reid and they've got Patrick Mahomes. The Jags' time is coming, by the way. The time's coming when the Jags will be the answer to that question, but I don't think it's quite this year.
Yeah, I'm with you, Frank. Look, I have the Eagles down. I just think they're, like you said, the NFC is a little bit straightforward. There's a gap after you get past Philadelphia and San Francisco. And as I was looking at it, I was like, all right, it's one of these two. I sided with you there on the Eagles. I have the Bengals making it to the Super Bowl. I think they have been there for a couple of extra years. I think they're ready to maybe compete with the Chiefs just a little bit, able to squeak by them and get to the Super Bowl this year. You're right. Look. The Jaguars are a young team. They're an ascending team. By far, this season should not be the best year out of the next couple of years for them because players should continue to get better year in and year out because they're such a young football team. I think the Jaguars are close. I do. But maybe next year we can really start to talk about them in that Super Bowl matchup. Who knows? Hopefully, Frank, both of us are wrong. Fingers crossed there. If we're both wrong, that would mean that the Jaguars are heading to the Super Bowl, and we're talking about a trip to Las Vegas, which would be perfect for all of us, a road to Vegas kind of year. We'll have to keep an eye on all of that and how everything kind of shakes out this season. It should be a fun ride. It's definitely going to be a fun one. And hopefully you at home decide to spend it with us here on Teal the Show every Monday and Friday night. Thanks for tuning in tonight, everybody. Good night, and go Jags.